Doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Always pleasure, man. And Sam Bradford, I think, obviously they put a lot into him, and I don't know that he has made anybody feel warm and fuzzy yet. But how long do you think Chip Kelly should give Sam Bradford to make people feel warm and fuzzy? Does he have an obligation to his team to make a switch if necessary?
I think it depends on the circumstances and the timing of the season. I think if they lose Sunday, for instance, and Bradford plays terribly, it can get late early in this season because then the Eagles will be 0-2 in the division, and that's a big hole to climb out of, no matter how mediocre the NFC East is. And the thing with what we've seen from Bradford so far is that, and I wrote this in that piece today, Mark Sanchez can do what Bradford has done so far for the Eagles, and he can do it better. He can throw those intermediate routes. We've seen him do it last year. That doesn't make Mark Sanchez a great quarterback. It just makes him better than the one that Sam Bradford is right now. So, it's interesting. The Eagles took this chance, and Kelly took this chance on Bradford, thinking that if you got him in a different environment and in a different system, he might be the franchise quarterback that a team like the Eagles needs to make a Super Bowl run. And I don't know about you, I haven't seen any of that yet. Maybe a little bit in the second half of the Atlanta game, but that's been it. So, Sam needs to start playing better because it's going to be a problem if he doesn't. It's going to be a real problem.
Yeah, and let me ask you this. I mean, I liken this deal to the Sixers making the Bynum deal. Like, they thought they got as far as they could go, so they take a swing for Bynum, and they fail miserably. Do you fault Chip Kelly for saying, look, I think Nick Foles got us as far as Nick Foles can take a team, but I need to see if this guy can get us further? Do you look back and have fault for them even making that decision?
I don't fault Chip for making that decision, and it's funny you bring up the Bynum deal. I would fault the Sixers for making the Bynum deal for not knowing more about who Bynum was as a person and a player and his dedication to basketball. You didn't have those concerns with Bradford. You didn't really know what he was in St. Louis. And, at the time that he tore his knee the first time in 2013, he was on his way to having a really good season. He threw 14 touchdown passes and just 4 interceptions in the first 7 games of the season. His completion percentage was close to 61%. He was starting to look like the guy everybody thought he was going to be when the Rams took him number 1 overall in 2010. And then he hurts his knee, and then he hurts it again. So I could see why Chip made the move, and it made sense. If you think, well, we've gone as far as we can go with Nick Foles, he is not an elite guy, the 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions are a byproduct of Chip's system and the league's unfamiliarity with it and all those things, then okay, how else are you going to get a franchise quarterback? One's going to be hurt, and you're going to have to make a big-time trade to get him, and you'll be a little lucky if he turns out to be the guy. And so go for it. The Eagles hadn't won a championship in 55 years. They haven't won a championship in 55 years. Why wouldn't you take that chance? The question now is, did they make a good bet on the wrong guy?
Yeah, and moving forward here, when you look at Sam Bradford and Chip Kelly, I mean, today Bradford was asked about throwing the ball down the field, and he kind of indicated, well, they're not really calling plays for me to throw the ball down the field. I'd like to get more opportunities. So is it the scheme holding this team back, or is it Sam Bradford that they don't trust to open up the scheme?
I think it's both. I think more of it falls on Bradford. I think if you were completing more of those intermediate routes, 10 to 19 yards, for instance, Pro Football Focus pointed out he's only completing about 34% of those throws. Things might open up more for the deep ball, but he hasn't been accurate on the deep balls that he has thrown. Look at the ones on Sunday against the Jets. He missed Miles Austin on a third down fade where Austin was open. He missed Nelson Aguilar on a deep crossing route where Aguilar was wide open, and if he hits him in stride, it's a touchdown. He's been fine on those really short throws, but anything down the field, the few times the Eagles have called it, he hasn't been on point, and he needs to be.
Yeah, and that's what he was advertised to be, a very accurate passer. Mike Sielski is with us, the columnist over at the Philadelphia Inquirer, Philly.com. And, obviously Bradford decided not to move forward with contract negotiations. What are the Eagles going to have to see from this point forward? I mean, do do they say, look, this guy wasn't healthy, he's a little rusty, but from like the 7th week on, he plays really well? What do you think goes into the decision process for his future?
You got to look at the whole season. You can't. I mean, the Eagles would be nuts to try to extend him now, and they don't have to. They can franchise tag him. They can transition tag him at the end of the year. They don't have to do anything. It never made sense to me why they were discussing an extension with Bradford before he even played a game for them, because there was no reason on their part to do that. There was no reason on either party's part to look for an extension. If you're Bradford and you think you can play great in Chip's system, play great and go throw for however many yards and however many touchdowns and have a great year, and then go test the free agent market or hold the Eagles, over a barrel and say, I'm not going to play unless you give me an extension for X years and X dollars. So it's premature at this point. It was always premature to discuss an extension, I thought, and it's really premature now based on the way he's played through those first 3 games.
Mike, as you're right, there's a lot of chicken or egg here. I guess the one question is, you watch this guy play. To me, I mean, I think a lot of people, he looks, I don't want to say afraid, but he just doesn't look right. He looks like he's holding back, maybe is the best way, that there's something more for him to give, but he's just not letting loose. Do you watch him and think that he is mentally not ready to play the quarterback position in the NFL?
I think it's an open question. He's healthy enough. His knee is healed. Whether he is psychologically, trusting that knee and trusting his offensive line, only Sam Bradford knows that, and you have to shoot him up with sodium pentothal to get an honest answer. But I will say this, I don't put a lot of stock in looking over a guy's demeanor and judging him based on that. Maybe his demeanor would be exactly the same if he were playing well. What I know is he's not playing well. He's not stepping into his throws. He's not delivering the ball on time and with accuracy. So if that's because he's been out for close to 2 years and needs to brush off some rust, if that's because that's who Sanford is, I don't know at this point. All I know is he's got to be better if the Eagles are going to have any shot to do anything significant this season.
Yeah, and I know we talked about at the top, but, the Eagles, and I think Chip Kelly, if this team is in it, he owes it to them that if the quarterback position's holding them back, that he has to do something. I'll ask you, do you think at some point, not because of injury, that Sam Bradford, will he make it through the season without being benched at any point?
I don't know, because once Chip benches him and goes to Sanchez, I think that's pretty much the end for Bradford here. Remember, the reason Bradford was brought in was because Chip and the Eagles thought that neither Nick Foles nor Mark Sanchez was really good enough to get them where they wanted to be, to contend for a championship. So if you go to Sanchez, you're basically saying, okay, we don't think Sam is the guy either, and so we're going to have to start fresh in the offseason. Maybe you can bench him for a half and get away with that and go back to him the following week, but not for more than a half, I don't think, not for an extended period of time.
And then the follow-up, a lot of people would say they don't have a lot invested in him. He has no contract. He can just walk if he's not the guy. But then where do you go? You're back to square one. You go to Mark Sanchez next year. You draft a rookie and play a rookie quarterback with this team that seemingly has a lot of guys early in their careers. I mean, this would be a big mess if Bradford turns out not to be the guy, wouldn't it?
It would, but it was kind of a mess anyway. I mean, I think people forget that Nick Foles last year was not Nick Foles of 2013, and that there was a lot of smoke and mirrors with the Eagles getting off to that 9-3 start between Foles and Sanchez. So, will it be a mess? It will be if Bradford doesn't work out, but it was a mess anyway. It really was. I know people don't want to hear that. I know people think that. Nick Foles, he had a winning record. He was 14-4 as a starter, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot more that goes into a quarterback's win-loss record than just the quarterback. And if you looked at each of those games, Nick Foles was not the primary reason the Eagles were winning a lot of those games. In some respects, they were winning in spite of him.
Well, and you always ask yourself the question, would you want Alex Smith to be your quarterback? Do you want Andy Dalton? I mean, a lot of people think those guys stink, but guess what? They win a lot of games, and they've won a lot of games in this league, just not a lot of games that matter. And I think that's what Chip said, that I think this guy can win, but not the games that we need him to win. Mike Sielski's got plenty more on Sam Bradford. So far, the grade incomplete. He'll continue that on Sunday when he is the starting quarterback against the Washington Redskins. Check out Mike Sielski over at Philly.com and the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.